Mhm. All right. Welcome everyone to From Crystal with Love XO. I am your host, Crystal, and I am excited to be here with you guys on a Sunday to talk about something that is a topic very near and dear to my heart. I have a special guest that's going to be joining me. Best-selling author Casey Mills is going to join me in just a second. But first of all, I want to thank you guys for joining on. This is Memorial Day weekend, and so I know this is the last bit of solitude that we all have before we go back to work. So I thank you for spending it with me today. I'm trying to get my lighting right, but I wanted to make sure that we got in here because today, like I said, is a very important conversation. As you guys may or may not know, is National Mental Health Month. And so I thought, I've been waiting for an opportunity to review Netflix's Queen Charlotte. And I thought, what better time to do it before the month of May ends, and with an author that has kind of delved into mental health issues with her own book. And so, like I said, bestselling author Casey Mills is going to be joining me here in just a second. She is absolutely amazing. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy that. But we're going to get all into Netflix's Queen Charlotte, because I tell you guys what, the reason I wanted to have this conversation about Queen Charlotte is because I'm a huge fan of Shonda Rhimes, right? So you guys remember when Scandal first came out, How to Get Away with Murder, not necessarily always the concepts, but the writing is immaculate. And so I am a huge fan of hers, but I feel like Bridgerton and the Netflix series took it in a total different direction. And I was able to really appreciate her writing and the way she puts together her projects even more. And so I was a big fan of Bridgerton, but I really feel like Queen Charlotte is my favorite out of the series. And it's just because, again, the writing is absolutely superb. The storylines engross you. They make you connect with the characters. You find yourself enjoying the beauty of romance in a way that we don't always get to do now. So I think that I'm just trying to make sure that we get Casey in. I think that it's great. It's a great opportunity to really talk about something that is engrossing. I'm sure many of you out there have watched the series. If you have not watched Netflix's 6-part series, Queen Charlotte, you may want to be, move with caution, because we are going to do, there are going to be some spoilers. So I'm giving you guys a spoiler alert right now. It wasn't what I was expecting. I love Queen Charlotte. It wasn't what I was expecting. Hey, Terry, thank you so much for joining. I'm going to go ahead and bring Casey Mills in for this conversation. Thank you so much, Terry, for your comment. Hey, lady.
Hey, how are you?
I am great. Happy Memorial Day weekend.
I know, same.
Have you had a busy weekend so far?
I've done absolutely nothing.
That is beautiful. That is exactly
Yeah.
what you were supposed to do. That is exactly what you were supposed to do. I've done a little bit of work because I have clients. If you guys don't know, TLC's documentary Forever TLC is debuting on June 3rd. So I've been behind the scenes doing prep work for that. Super exciting. Chili was on Tamron Hall on Friday. So there's been a little bit of work going on over here, but not too much. But as I was saying, Casey, before I brought you on, I'm excited because May is National Mental Health Month, and I loved this series, Queen Charlotte, mainly because I'm a huge Shonda Rhimes fan. I'm a fan of great writing, as I know you are as well.
Right.
But even in a more personal way, I have a family member that I love dearly that's very close to me that is struggling with mental health issues. And I don't feel like I have seen um, mental illness addressed in a loving way until I saw Queen Charlotte. And I was just moved because this was a love story that also included mental illness. And I don't believe I've ever seen that in written word, in visual, or anything. And it actually, I was in tears through some of the scenes that we saw with Queen Charlotte and her husband George, because if you know anyone that deals with mental illness, um, the love for that person doesn't diminish, but often you are at a loss as
Right.
of how to relate to them or how to help them. And it's a helpless feeling. And so I love the fact that you actually are an author that tackled this in a book that you have coming out. So I'd love to welcome you to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to get into some of the themes of Queen Charlotte that I think are just absolutely amazing. Besides mental health, there's also ageism and the fact that we are still, sexual beings even as we get older. There's so much to unpack there. But first, I want to introduce you to the audience and tell everybody a little bit about why it was fitting for you to be here to talk about mental health.
So my most recent release it is a romance, but the male main character is dealing with bipolar disorder. Mm-hmm. And so as an author, and I've done this myself, I know that a lot of my pen sisters have done the same thing. We joke a lot when it comes to writing characters that have, erratic behavior and stuff like that. And it's, oh, they're crazy. Oh, he's just acting bipolar. And it can be taken out of context sometimes. And then you don't think about how it's translating to those who are truly dealing with it.
Right.
So with this book, I actually had a male character, and the struggle was peeling back his layers, letting everybody see how he's dealing with it, how it's affecting his family, but still humanizing him and allowing him to be in a place where he deserves love, and he believes that he deserves love regardless of what's going on in his life. And it was one of those things I felt like I hadn't seen it in books before, where it was taken seriously and the research was done, and these characters were written in a way that the funny thing was, I guess for me, my beta readers, I sent them to 2 beta readers. One of them has a son who is bipolar, and I didn't know this prior to sending it. And the other one had a mother who is bipolar. Had I known, because me and my overthinking, I'd be like, I'm not sending it to them. But they literally embraced everything about the book. They were like, this is the first time I've seen someone humanize this subject and show these people for who they really are, that they are people who are dealing with something. It does not define who they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's what I loved so much about Queen Charlotte. Thank you so much, Charity. I have never seen that. I've never seen that, and especially not in a love story.
Right.
And I love what you just said about humanizing it. I've been very open and transparent with my audience. I come from a father my father was a drug addict,
right.
And my father died from a drug overdose. And that was very difficult for me to deal with for a long time, when I would hear people talk about, oh, crackhead this or crack, people make jokes, crackheads gone crazy. Yes. So many people that make fun of that. And so for a long time, before I had really dealt with it, I would hear that and I would automatically it would be hurtful, right? Because your parent is someone that you never want to think of people making, like, you just don't want to think of your father being a joke. And it took me a long time to actually deal with that and get over that. And so now I can hear that it doesn't affect me. But for my family member now that is dealing with mental illness, because there doesn't seem to be closure, there's not always answers,
right.
to it. I find myself in that place where I don't like to talk to people about it, because if they say something that is hurtful, it's probably going to affect I'm not at peace with it. I'm not really sure what to do with it. So I think conversations like this, and I think even your book, and definitely, Queen Charlotte, are great things for us to be embracing, because mental health is something that all of us are dealing with. Most people have a family member or a friend or someone close to them,
right,
that is dealing with severe mental illness that, in my situation, this person is not able to, they're not able to really
have a voice right now.
Right. So I thought this was a great topic. And I think the series was beautifully written, and touched on so many topics that I think are important for us as African-American women to really, address. So what I want to do right now is show a clip. And this is one of my favorite. I have several favorite parts of this series, but this is one of my favorite, dealing with Queen Charlotte and her husband, George, who was the king, and who, of course, this happened centuries ago. So they didn't really know what to do with people that had mental illness. And so there were a lot of extreme things they would try to do to bring relief or to get them to be able to get rid of the crazy or whatever. So this is a very heart touching scene. It's my favorite one. And it just shows again the strength of Black women, the strength of a woman, especially a Black woman, and how she was able to still love him fiercely, even though, throughout his imperfection. So let's watch this and then we're going to talk about it.
Seems my tie him. I tie the king. Everyone out now. George, look, George, it is me. Oh, Venus. Venus is here. George. Damn, Venus. I am Charlotte. I am Charlotte. And I need you to be George again. I need you to try. Come back to me. Please, George, come back. George, come back. Do you feel that, George? It kicks. I am Charlotte. This is our child. And we need you to be George again, or none of us are anyone.
Oh, it's such a touching scene, because at that point, if you guys haven't watched it, at that point, Charlotte has been kept in the dark, for so long about what the issues are. And finally, she just stands up and says, I'm going to go figure out what's going on with my husband. And she finds him, being subjected to something that he's actually subjecting himself to, trying to get better. And it's just one of those pivotal scenes that where now they're not fighting against each other, but now she's able to see what the problem is so they can fight together. What did you think of this portrayal? Because I'm not sure what exactly, they never tell us exactly what illness George is dealing with. Obviously, there seems to be some schizophrenia involved, and he goes in and out of consciousness where he doesn't know who he is. And it's very complicated. But of course, this is a story that happened years and years ago. So they probably didn't have the same medical, theories and philosophies that we have now. But what was your take on that scene, and how Shonda Rhimes was able to show that Queen Charlotte loved him in spite of the fact that she really didn't understand what he was going through?
So for me, like when you see that, it almost, that word again, that humanizing is so powerful. So there's such a connection with people when you allow there to be. Yeah. So with whatever he had going on and losing touch and things like that, I mean, it could have been a number of things, but he's within himself. But seeing that, it just lets you know that the simplest things of recognition and being there for somebody in that moment and saying, hey, I see you. I see you. Can you see me? Come back to me. That kind of thing. That's what I see. And it's interesting because so many people see the disease and they see the dysfunction, and they lose sight of the fact that sometimes, and it's not always, I mean, medication plays a huge role, but it's not always just that. It's just being able to be in touch with those people who you're truly connected to. Mm-hmm. So that's what I see with that. It's powerful to let you know that your bonds can be so important. It could be, mother and child. It could be someone you love, all of these different connections that basically show the power of seeing that person.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that. Charity says, this is my favorite scene. I actually cried when she said, come back to me. I did too. I almost cried watching it again right then, because,
it's touching.
It's touching. And what you said is so true, Casey, about I see you. I'm here with you in that present moment. Yeah. And I think for people that are dealing with mental illness, a lot of times there's a shame because they do know there's something wrong. And
Yep.
actually in the series, George tried to hide himself from her. And he tried to have her live someplace else because he was aware of the fact that he was struggling with this. And so for her to say, I'm here, come back to me, it was so touching. It was such a beautiful example of being present and loving unconditionally. And I think that's really what, love stories are about. I love the fact that you're a romance author, Casey. And I think that a lot of times it's really difficult to make romance novels come to life. Like, because when you're reading something, for me, when you're reading, your imagination is just able to take the book wherever you want it to go from a personal standpoint. Shonda Rhimes is one of the few that have been able to really take that romanticism and bring it to where it feels delicious watching her
Right.
this series, like you're in the middle of a romance novel. So we feel the passion between them, in spite of the fact that Charlotte doesn't know what's going on. He's dealing with mental illness. There's some racial tension there in the palace. Right. All these things are swirling around. How do you think, what is the beauty, I think, of like the romance novel, and what is your take on how she was able to make that come to life, and that you don't lose any of that, even though she's brought it to screen, and it's not, our imagination is no longer, we don't get to work as hard with our imagination, but it's
right.
done in a way that suggests there's this unyielding passion,
Yeah, and the hard part of that is, like you said, it's just feeling that connection. So for me, for instance, with this story, the one that I just wrote, it's a similar situation, but he didn't hide himself. When he was faced with it, he was upfront and he said, this is who I am, this is what I have, but his expectation was, you're going to walk away. And he didn't. And so, like, what Shonda Rhimes is able to do is connect you to those characters individually. And then you learn them and you feel them, and then you connect them together. And so it's really peeling back their layers is what gives you all those feels. You can't just throw somebody at a reader or a viewer and say, this is who that person is. Yeah. You have to show us through their actions. And so I think that the easiest explanation is you just have to really bring those characters to life through their actions. You have to show, and even watching, it's so different with a book because you can use your words and you can draft it and you can give them all of those feels, the simple touches, the colorful words, but on screen, you literally have to show it through facial expressions, through dramatic pauses, through the touches, something as simple as him touching her stomach. Yeah, this is our baby. Do you know who I am? Those things. So I think that that's the beauty of it, and it takes a special type of person, a special mind to be able to see that, to create it and then visually see it. And that's something that's just phenomenal. You have to be in that space and you have to be those characters in a sense. Right. You cannot write them and just put them on paper and say, this is them. You have to feel. There are times I'm writing and I'm like, my face is balled up or I'm laughing because I am those characters. And that's what Shonda had to do to bring these characters to life. No, I agree. I know when I wrote my first book is a novel, and I felt, the weird thing is I felt such a loss when the book was finished. I missed him. Because I felt like she was a part of me, and every day we were together, and every day I was writing, I felt her presence, and I missed it. It's a weird experience, and I know it is. Writing fiction is that way. Terry T. Baby Davis says, what was the reasoning for them being married without Charlotte knowing about the king's condition? So if you guys remember in the series, she is brought to marry him because they need an heir. They need an heir to the throne to keep the name going on. And because people around them knew that the king had some type of disorder. There were rumors going around. So they brought someone in that didn't know that he agreed to initially. And that would be but really the purpose of them bringing her was not for them to fall in love. It really was for the mother just to get an heir so that they would have a
the bloodline would continue, right? So they did all this for that, but that's also why they didn't tell her. They just wanted her to be fine. She was very wealthy. Just stay over there and be fine with everything and just produce an heir. That's why you're here. But they actually fell in love, and she wanted more. She didn't want to just be a queen that was over in a castle by herself. She actually wanted a real love story. She wanted to know what was going on. She was not okay with the status quo of just being given this title. She wanted to feel, and so she was lonely. She missed him, and that's why they tried to keep it a secret, because they didn't want her to leave, her to run. And of course, if they explained what he was dealing with, that was the thought process that,
especially back then, because they didn't have the tools and the understanding to deal with it. So
right.
What you don't understand, you fear.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us because this was such a huge thing. This is what I loved the most. There are so many other things, like I said, for us to unpack in Queen Charlotte, but I really loved the fact that we got a chance to see what a love story could potentially look like from that perspective, because we've seen love stories with people that have illnesses, with people that are, handicapped, but we've never seen at least really just talked about and really addressed someone that has a mental illness. So what are some things that you were able to do with your character? And let us know the title so I can put that here in the comments, Casey, of this new book.
So it's Shadows and Whispers. And with my character, of course, it's fiction. So there's some fictional elements in there. So you basically have an arranged marriage where you have two brothers in the past that have killed each other. And now these two other siblings are going to marry each other to fix some issues that they have. So it's an arranged marriage. So with him, basically, he had been gone away from his family because he didn't get the support from his parents. He was damaged goods. They didn't support him. The only person who truly supported him was his brother. So when his brother comes to find him and says, I need you to come home. I need you to marry this person so that we can fix these family issues that we have. He did it for his brother. His brother was the only one who really supported him. And at one point when Elias was spiraling, basically ready to take his life, his brother takes the gun and says, if you die, I die. So that's the type of support he had from his brother. So with the story, it is an arranged marriage. And so the female lead, Cress, when she finds out about him, she says, no, I can figure this out. We're going to be okay. She does the research to try and figure out what to do for him, but respects him enough to come to him so that he can guide her. But of course, he's a man, and that was another thing I wanted to do. I've seen it from a female perspective, loosely written in books, but not men, because you've got that ego. You've got those insecurities of still being seen as an alpha with this thing, because it's a thing. It's a whole thing that people use to define you with. And so with them, it was almost, I'm going to tell you who I am, and this is what I am. But then he still kind of hid a part of himself. So when he starts spiraling and he goes through that cycle of really hitting rock bottom and things, unfold and fall apart, and they're like, you need to run, you need to go, whatever. She's like, no, I'm not, I'm staying here. So when he's medicated and he's level again and he comes out of it, the first thing he says to his brothers, when did she leave? He said she didn't. I told her to, but she didn't. She's here. So that's kind of what I did. I wanted to show that their connection was strong enough for her to see him, and no matter what this thing is, because it is a thing, and it is something that most people can't process or understand or don't care to. I'm not going to say they can't. They don't care to. They just, so that was my biggest thing. I wanted to show him as a person, but still show what he was going through, but also see it through the eyes of the people that love these people. And so you got to see it through his brother's eyes and through his wife's eyes. And then you got his perspective. So there's just so many layers of emotion through this, like that it drained me. Getting to the end of that, it was just like, wow, a whole roller coaster ride. And it was received that way. So that was the first thing. So many people who were dealing with it would write me or leaving reviews. I appreciate you for humanizing, putting a face to it, for dealing with it respectably. This felt real. This is what my brother, my mom, my sister is going through. But
Yeah.
it's fiction. So you gave them a happily ever after. It gives me hope.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And we know with this story with Queen Charlotte, there wasn't necessarily a happy
Right.
ending, but we were able to see places of happiness and places of joy
Yeah.
throughout the story. If you guys are just joining, this is Christal with From Christal with Love XO, and we are doing a review of Queen Charlotte. I'm really not doing a review because I loved it. I have nothing negative to say at all. I loved it. There were so many things within this six-part series that I feel like are really important for us to have conversation about. And so that's why I've invited my good friend Casey Mills, who is a best-selling author and actually has a book titled Shadows and Whispers, where she actually talks about and deals with a situation that's much like what we saw in Queen Charlotte, with a male lead character that's struggling with bipolar disorder, but is able to still have a love story. Okay, so in the book, I absolutely loved how Cress didn't walk away. She loved Elias through everything.
Yeah, and that sometimes that's the hard thing to do, I think, and especially for us, because, and when I say us, our people, we don't discuss it. And when we do, it's very cliche because it's easier to, like you were saying about your dad, it's easier to joke and laugh about it than to really dig in and put understanding behind it.
Right.
And so that was my biggest thing. It was just, it's a layer of it, but it's not completely who they are.
Right, absolutely. And that's hard because sometimes it's hard to see through that. We saw that with Queen Charlotte and George. I mean, actually it comes to a point, if you watch the Netflix series, it does come to a point where at the end of their journey, their love journey, that they are separated because the illness does take over. And it keeps them from being able to be together on a regular basis. But like I said, there are still some beautiful pieces of their life together. They have a lot of children. Actually, this story is based on a true story. And I was doing some research. There was a Queen Charlotte, there was a King George, and he did have an illness. They didn't have a particular word for it. They would say the king is mad. They would call, people, but it got progressively worse over time. And that's actually true with a lot of mental illnesses. It can start off a certain way, and then it can get progressively more aggressive as people get older. Just speaking of that piece of it, because like I said, this series had so many different things for us to delve into, especially as it relates to Black women. First of all, I love the fact that with Queen Charlotte, we saw this beautiful love story. It was a multiracial love story, but I love the fact that I feel like Shonda Rhimes was intentional in showing Charlotte's natural hair, showing just the beauty of, to me, like African-American features, and not watering it down. And I think that's where I get so frustrated sometimes when they try to show beauty when it comes to, Black women. And it's like, but you're showing beauty in one area. So it's like the beauty that is closest to not being African-American. Right? So it really doesn't feel like, you really feel like Black women are beautiful, but for us to show her natural hair, and for them to make it look beautiful, but not take away from its authenticity, was really important, I think, to the storyline. We also see other characters in the story that also are very proud of their heritage and the fact that they're Black, even though there is racial issues there. So what were your thoughts on that? Because I think I read so many comments from women saying, oh my God, when you saw them even in a sexual embrace, because so often when we think of intimacy, the way it's shown, the way it's visualized on television or in movies, it very much follows the European standard of beauty. So she's got long, straight weave in, he's this was like the real, her hair was sweated out, the love scene showed the real of what it feels like, what it looks like, but still in a way that was so beautiful. And I think, wow, hopefully little girls are not watching that, but for young women and young African-American women to see that represented to me, that would have never happened when we were growing up. You know what I
Oh
mean?
no. And the thing is, like you said, it's there. The representation is there because typically there is this one box that they put us in when it comes to beauty and things of that nature. And it's harder. I'm a fairer skinned African American woman, but my daughter is darker skinned. She takes after her father, and it's so odd sometimes what they show as beauty. And the thing is, like with Queen Charlotte, even with it being interracial, of course we'd love to see that across the board where it's all us, but you have to start somewhere. And the inclusion is happening. And so I appreciate that aspect of it. And I appreciate, like you said, the fact that it wasn't watered down. It was one of those things where here she is in all of her beauty, and it was presented in a way that it wasn't highlighted as, but this one is beautiful, because we get that a lot sometimes.
Absolutely.
And it was just like in all her glory, this is what it is, and this is okay, and this is normal. So I think that, yeah, like I'm with you. I hope little girls weren't watching those things. But I think that representation is extremely important. I'm an advocate for Black love. That's just what I write. That's what I do. So that's what I want to see. But you have to see it in all aspects because everybody is not like me. And so there are some that are going to go one way or the other. But to see us in our natural state and not be made to reflect what European standards are, I suppose, is just it's an accomplishment to me. I love that.
It is. I agree. Just another kudos to Shonda Rhimes and her entire team. And there were so many things that I enjoyed about this. All right, Lady Danbury, Agatha Danbury was another favorite, like close favorite. Queen Charlotte was my favorite, but Agatha Danbury was a close second because we got to see just real issues being tackled, right? So
Right.
Agatha was a young, beautiful woman that was betrothed to a older man and for money and what he was, for the status and the money. And when we first met her, we saw her in a loveless marriage, but she was tenacious about her purpose. And I feel like she knew who she was, even though she was in a situation that would seem to be compromising, right? And so what was your take? And you guys, please, in the comments, I love when the chat actually gets involved with the conversation, because I think this is one of those ones, as I'm watching on Twitter, we see these sex scenes that are hard to watch, but we know that that's real life, right? We know that there are young, beautiful women that are laying underneath older men just doing what they feel like they need to do because they need the security or they need the wherewithal, right? And they have they are not in a position, or they don't feel like they're in a position to have other. But one of the things that I thought was interesting about this character is, like I said, she was doing it and she also was empowering him, which is so interesting. Even though it's like she was smarter than him, empowering him.
Isn't that typically how it is, though?
Of course, but it's almost like, what do you think her mission was? And again, I welcome the comments to chime in on that as well, because you see her never veering off the path of her purpose.
Yeah.
And knowing that, empowering him, even letting him feel like what was happening was his doing when it wasn't. It was definitely hers. But she just seemed like a woman that was so in control and had such a clear understanding of herself. And even as we see her age and get older, she's one of the characters that you just fall in love with. And there's this mystery about her, but this strength and this self-awareness was just something I really, really enjoyed in that character. What were your thoughts on Lady Agatha Danbury?
So this is what I'll say. With life in general, I think that we go into people's behaviors with a preconceived notion of what we would say or do.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to situations like that, like they always say, walk a mile in someone's shoes. So it might not have been what I would have done or you would have done or whatever, or the process, altogether. But when you look at it from who she was, and like you said, she was intentional about everything that she did. When you look at it from that perspective, then you have to respect the fact that she made decisions about her life, regardless of what anybody thought. And she said, okay, this may not be ideal, but I'm living happy to the best of my abilities. And also too, even with empowering him. So with women in general, across the board, our thing is we'll let you think it's your idea to empower you to get, but there's always a benefit, and there's a benefit on both sides. So if you have that partner that's empowered and they feel like, hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing great, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm processing, or whatever the case may be, but then you're benefiting from it because it's that selflessness of, I don't need the kudos for it, I don't need the pat on the back, I just need to get what I need to get out of this. And it's something you can give freely, and there's no loss on your end for it. But I just feel like, with my take on that, is just like, you have to respect, with TV, books, with anything, with your friends, with real life, you have to walk into situations understanding their perspective, not what you think you would have done. And when you do that, sometimes it opens up and you're just like, you know what, it wouldn't have been what I would have done, but I respect what you're doing. Right. Ball out.
Right. No, facts. That's true. That's very true. I think, like you said, that we don't know the time period and what women were able to do, right, but that did show a lot of strength and being able to keep one's mind in a situation that may or may not be ideal.
Right.
I think a lot of times we are judgmental on things that we have no idea what our own reaction would have been in that situation, but I love that character. I'm going to show this clip. This is my favorite clip of Lady Danbury, and it's a scene where she's talking to her son. If you haven't watched it, this basically is after her husband passes away. The title of Lord Danbury has been given to her husband because they needed to make African Americans have some status, because the queen was an African American, right? So, or of African descent. So they gave titles out to some of the people of African descent. But they didn't give it with the idea of what would happen when that person that was given the title died. Right. So she decided, her husband was given the title, and she made them not only give us the title, but you're going to give us everything that comes with the title.
With the title.
So when her husband,
not a name.
Right, not a name. I want the property. I want the respect. I want him to be able to go to be at the different halls and different balls that come along with this title. It's not going to just be a name only for us.
Yeah.
And that was beyond clever.
That within itself is just like, you have to respect the moves that she made. You may not like how she did it or how she got there, but you have to respect the bigger picture of what she was doing.
Absolutely, she was. So this scene is, her husband has died, and she is reminding everyone that the title now belongs to her son. And it's just, I know for me as a mother of a Black son who has constantly told him who he is and reminds him of who he is. I know you are a mother of a son as well. And we are constantly, I think as women, especially mothers, there's this fierceness about our boys, because we do know how hard this world is for Black boys. This is just a beautiful scene. This also made me cry. I had to play this today because it was one of those moments in this series that just makes you see, again, the brilliance of Shonda Rhimes with attacking a sentiment that was happening back in the day, but it was something a mother could very well be putting in her son today. So
you are, and you are Lord Danbury, and you will take your rightful place because you are entitled to it, and because you are my son. You are the son of Agatha Danbury, born named Soma, royal blood of the Pamendembo tribe in Sierra Leone. You come from warriors. We win.
You come from warriors. We win.
Just like that whole thing, like you said, even back then, when it translates to where we are now, like you said, you have to have those conversations because the world beats our young Black men down for the simplest things. And to know that even back then you're pouring into them in that way without all of the outside noise that we have today, it's amazing. It's just like, to see that is so empowering.
I agree. I love that. I love that reminding. I think every mother, whether it's your daughter or your son, I think that's one of the things that we do is we remind our children who they are, and we are constantly putting that confidence, in them. And I think it doesn't end. I think, that was a beautiful scene between her and her son was 4, but I have children that are grown now. My son is a professor and he's on his way to Paris. And I'm like, you are amazing. You're constantly feeding into them. And I think it means so much. But that was a beautiful display of that a mother's love and how it definitely has the ability to shape the way a child sees himself in this world.
Yeah, agreed. Because we get to that point where regardless of what you think, see, or feel, sometimes you question and you doubt, and a lot of it's internal, as well as external, but you have to have those constant reminders to say, hey, I am great, regardless. And that's something that it's never changes. It's a constant struggle. My kids are grown too, but it's a constant struggle. It's daily, and now I have this 27-year-old that's teaching 5-year-olds at school that look like her, and she's taking that to school with her and saying to the same kids, hey, you are good, you're great, you
Isn't
can
that beautiful?
anything. It is I
That's
love
so
it.
beautiful. Yeah, that is so. I think when you see the fruit of your work, when you see the fruit that the seeds that you plant blossom in your children, it's the most rewarding thing that you could ever imagine. So I'm sure seeing your daughter teach little ones, it's just that's amazing.
And I think the funny part of that is that we've had this conversation. I'll keep it quick, but we fumbled through it. Like, there's no handbook, but to know that we got it right, it's just like, in some sense, it's like, okay, we did that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right about that. There's no handbook, and I know that I've done some good things, and I've probably made some mistakes, but see that it's a beautiful thing. Let me ask you this, Casey, because another part I pulled one clip on each situation for us to discuss, but another really, really moving piece with Lady Danbury's story was her husband that was very elderly. He passed away. And then the Queen's brother, actually, who was a man of status, actually better looking and younger, more probably a fitting spouse for her, proposed and wanted her to leave where she was and come be his wife and be taken care of, which was something that, that was a feat in itself, because for her to be a widow and be given the opportunity to have a position of status, but she turned it down. And she said that she had just discovered herself after being, married to Lord Danbury and kind of, being under his thumb, so to speak. And she said she was not going to give that up. And so she chose not to marry. And we see her later in the series as an unmarried woman who was very strong, who was very influential. But it was interesting to me that she made that decision. And she decided that she did not desire marriage after being in the marriage that she was in. What are your thoughts on the reasoning why? And we know that was a powerful scene when she said, I cannot do that again. She turned down, actually, I think he was a prince, his proposal. What were your thoughts on the message behind that?
I think basically you said it. She had just discovered herself, and her reasoning for being in that marriage was very intentional and very clear, and it was necessary. But the proposal that was coming, she found out who she was. She found her strength. She got her status. She had everything she needed. And sometimes self-love, the whole marriage thing and all of that is not necessarily for everyone. And I think that's saying to society, basically the message to me is, you were here, you did this, you experienced it, and you discovered through the process that it worked for what it needed to work for, but that's not for you. Maybe not at that time in her life, and she carried on and decided never going to do it again. But you can be whole by yourself. you know, and society does not allow you to believe that. And, you know, some may look at it and say, oh, well, she did the whole marriage thing. She had the kids, all of this and that. So it's a cheat. But to have this whole platter of goodness, more or less, handed to you afterwards to say, hey, well, come on over here and you can have, and for her to say, nope, I'm good. I can be whole by myself. I have what I need. I've loved, I've experienced, I'm good. So I think that's the message. I think that sometimes we overthink stuff. And when we watch stuff like that, but there too, again, we're going into it with our expectations, our wants, and our needs. But when you look at it in the simplest form, she was an amazing person. She said, I did that. I'm good now, you know, and sometimes you just really have to experience it. And you might experience and say, okay, I like it. I want to do it again. Or nope, I'm good. I am whole. And I think that's really what it was.
I like that. And I think, you know, for myself, and we've had conversations offline, I am someone that definitely is an advocate for Black love. I write about it. I interview and talk to people about it. You write about it all the time. But that doesn't mean, I tell people, because with my book, Dear Alpha Female, it's not him, it's you. I tell people that the mission and the message of this book is not to suggest the man is the prize. That is not my message. The man is not the prize. It is, if you want love and if you want a romantic love of any kind, I believe is there for you. But there's no law that says that we all have to have the same happily ever after.
Yes.
I feel like, as a person that's an advocate of love, and, you know, I'm in a situation, I'm very, very much in love, but I also was very much happy before I came. And I think that there's a balance between being someone that advocates for that, but also I never want anyone that listens to my channel or anyone that I interact with to think that I feel like there is one
script for everybody.
Right.
Yep. I agree. You know, and I've been married for 28 years, and it's not all, you know, rainbows and sunshine. You know, we've talked about this. You have to do the work. You know, you have your good and you have your bad. But I would never in my life, I have friends who are not married or who have never been and are divorced, just all across the board. And the thing is, you can't, I think that the message, the biggest part is that you can't be someone's happiness. And so that's the thing. You got to start with being able to, I guess, be whole. You have to be happy with yourself to be happy with someone.
Right.
And that's the part that people skip. And so they say, society says, like you were just saying, one script. This is that one script. And even though it works for me and that's where I am and I'm happy and things are good, I would never in my life say to anyone, well, you have to be married and you have to have kids and this is the script. This is the blueprint, because that's not for everybody. Some people are happy and whole and they have a world of people around them that give them that companionship, and companionship is not always black or white. It's different depending what you need. So I think for me, the biggest thing is that, like you said, you can't say to people, this is it, this is what you have to do. And if you don't do this, you're not going to be happy or you're not going to be viewed, you know, in a certain light or whatever. Those are things that we as people, we have to work on those things. But I also don't want to get away from saying that it's okay to be married, you know?
Right. I think for me, I really feel like it's what you desire. And I tell people, you know, there's been so many conversations about women saying that there's not men a certain way. Anytime, if fear is your reason, if you're afraid that you won't find love because you feel like there won't be anyone that finds you amazing, or you won't be, I think that is, the fear is always the wrong reason to make a decision. But if your decision is not based in fear, it really is just based in you feeling more comfortable and that not being a desire that's in your heart, then there's nothing wrong with that. My thing is just like, if there are women out there, because, you know, the social media narrative is that, you know, there are so many issues and men aren't this and women aren't that and da da da. So people get caught up in that, and then they try to deny something that they really want because they don't think they can have it. I think that's the problem that I don't like. You can have it if that's what you want, but if that's not what you want, there's nothing wrong with that either.
And I think the other side to that is be clear about what you want. And you even had that issue, when you did the show and everything, it was just like you walked away from that saying, I am now clear about what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And it opened up a different world for you at that point. And a
Yeah,
lot of
definitely.
times, yeah, people just aren't clear about what they want. And fear, like you said, is a part of that because they feel like, oh, I can't have it. So deep down inside, this is what I'm saying, but out loud, I'm telling everybody, you don't have to have it, or I don't want that, or, I'm fine on my own. And, you have to be intentional about what you want in order to attract it, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you, Charity. Lady Danbury was definitely a feminist before her time. I enjoyed her character. And that actually brings us to the last point for this review. And I think when you look at it, you see the love, you see mental health issues dealt with. You also see this young woman who was able to pour into how powerful she was able to empower her husband. She was able to empower her children. And then ultimately she was able to empower herself. And then there's this idea of ageism as it relates to women and their sexuality. And again, it's so fitting to have a romance author here. And if you haven't read one of Casey Mills' books, you have been missing out on some of the most steamy sex scenes that make those good old-fashioned romances. But the thing I love about your book is that there's a good balance of substance, but then there's also this very indulgent, romance that we know is a part of life. And so I'm going to play this clip first. If you guys are watching, we are doing a review of Netflix's Queen Charlotte, and this series so beautifully dealt with the fact that we do not see women past a certain age in a sex, and they're able to be sexual and sensual, and that is so ridiculous.
How insane is that? It's like
ridiculous.
You have some kind of little switch in you that goes flip. Okay, you can't be sexual anymore.
But you know what? It was so sad about it is when I've worked in publicity in the music industry for a long time, entertainment totally. But at first I really started in music, and it was so interesting because people would when they're talking about an artist being sexy, they would think if a woman was past like 35, that was no longer able, she was no longer able to be sexy. We see that's not true because we see J-Lo, we see Beyonce, we see all these women, Ashanti at this point, who are very sexy. But one of the things that we see with them is that they look youthful. And the idea that sexiness and sensuality is attached solely to youth. And kudos again to Shonda Rhimes for smashing that theory in this series, and then allowing us to realize that even if a woman does not look like she is in her 20s, she still can have a healthy, active, sensual, beautiful sex life. And it does not end. Youth and sexuality are not one and the same,
Yeah.
So
it comes with confidence with yourself and your partner, because if you're confident with yourself and you're confident with your partner, you feel sexy. It does not matter. Those are things that, regardless of what society says, it doesn't have to look pretty because they consider youthful and all of that pretty. But it just has to be that confidence that you have in you to know that, hey, this is what I feel like. I feel sexy.
I feel so. But you know what? It also is, I think, like you said, it starts with you. And I think specifically for women, a lot of times the images that we see when we don't see ourselves represented, it does affect us, right? And so we start to define sexuality and sensuality based on what we see. And so when you don't see yourself represented, it can be difficult to have that confidence sometimes and to be able to feel that way. And so I'm going to play this clip, and then I want us to kind of unpack this idea that we see introduced so expertly in the series with Lady Danbury and one of her girlfriends having a chat.
Seems my garden is in bloom.
It is the middle of winter. The ground is frozen.
My husband and I had a garden, a luscious garden with many varieties of flowers. And when he died, the garden died.
And I did not even think of the garden. I did not want the garden. But lately, without warning, the garden has begun to bloom.
The garden?
And now it wants things. Sunlight, air, touch.
Your garden is in bloom.
It is blooming out of control.
Oh, Violet.
I am becoming dangerous, Agatha.
I'm sure.
I almost asked a footman to lie on top of me today.
My Countess Bridgerton. What?
I must go. It was lovely to see you.
Oh, Violet.
No, I have been at the exhibition far longer than I planned. Good day.
The garden is blooming.
Funniest thing, she says, "Yo, my garden is in bloom. It wants things." Then there's a scene. If you guys have watched the series, there's a scene later where Lady Danbury goes to her and she explains to her friend that her garden too was in bloom, and she said she enjoyed her garden, and she continues to at this point in her life. But I think that again, that was ingenious because again, it's a subject that we don't talk about, right? We don't, especially in our community. We've just gotten to where we talk about sexuality, but there is a picture of what we accept as sensual.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, when you're writing, hey Colton, when you're writing sex scenes and you're writing, from the perspective of a woman, right? How do we keep from connecting to what society has told us is the definition of what's sensual? How are you able to keep the sensual, the energy there without giving into this very, very narrow idea of what sensual looks like for women, especially?
And the funny thing is, like, it's changed so much. Like, so sensuality has been replaced for vulgar. And that's another side of it. And so sensuality there's so many different layers of it. It's a look, it's a thought process, it's a walk, it's certain things like that. So with writing those scenes, first and foremost, you have to put yourself in the mindset of the characters. And even when you think about that scene, you can't write that from a perspective of a teeny bopper or of a youthful somebody, because they wouldn't really understand that. Sensuality in sex itself is different. Intimacy is different on those levels. And a lot of, in my books, the intimacy begins before they're even naked. It's conversations, it's thought processes and things of that nature. So for me, writing it, I have to, and I write all ages, like, for these books. Like, they could be mature characters, they could be younger. I lean more towards the mature characters because that's easier for me to write. But you have to understand their thought process and what makes them tick, because everybody's different. And I think for me, writing the scenes, and they can get, they can get steamy and racy regardless, because at that point, it's just, you're in that moment. And when you're in that moment, there's no age, there's no visual of what you need to look like. It's all about the feel of things. You're in that moment, and you have to write it from that perspective. You have to block out all of the outside noise, the expectations for what society is going to think is beautiful, in the bedroom with intimacy and sex, and just let these characters be. And I love that conversation that they had. It's just so true to life. And having girlfriends and stuff like that, you have conversations. They're about experiences and things that you might be going through. And like I said, nowadays stuff is so vulgar, it's out there everywhere, but not in the right manner, more or less. And we have these conversations all the time, but it's just like, to see that it was so true to life, but it was done in a way that could be seen as humorous and also real, real.
Absolutely. Well, I think humor allows us to let our guard down a little bit, right?
Right.
Embrace it. But I think, I think that there are so many women that after a certain point, and you could probably attest to this, we're definitely not at that point, but getting older, after your children, after having children, after your children are raised, a lot of times you don't see yourself represented when it comes to what is the picture of sensuality. Sometimes once you've been there and done that, it just feels like you're not a part of that. But I love the fact that we know that that's not true, because we know that there are people every age, like you said, sensuality and sexuality and all that doesn't have a number on it. But I think there's something that needs to be, I think women, not when it comes to being vulgar or even necessarily freedom, because I think we've gotten to a point where people are free talking about sexuality, but I think on an individual basis, I think sometimes women tend to think once they've spent so much of their life raising children, that you've gone through heartbreak, heartache, maybe even health issues, right? Some people have dealt with, breast mastectomies or different things that often can work to chip away at our feeling, our connection to our sexuality. I think there has to be a point where there's voices out there, there's representation. This is one example of that, saying your garden can still be in bloom after dealing with cancer, after raising children, dealing with grandchildren, maybe going through divorces, going through, severe health issues and being able to rebound. That is still a very big part of your life. And there's no reason that you shouldn't embrace it. And I think that message needs to be communicated more with women after 50, I would even say, because menopause, even, I know some women, go through menopause and are they're not in touch with their sensuality because you're dealing with so many other things that are affecting your the senses that are into, right? So I think that is a very important conversation that,
it is. And I think that a lot of it is just, like you said, society says that at this stage in your life, you have done all of these things, you should be satisfied. And I think that a lot of women have, like, their gardens are blossoming, but
or they're repressing.
But society says you can't tap into that because that's not acceptable. And I guess for me, I'm like, well, why are other things acceptable? The visuals, but you have these other. So I think part of it is just embracing the fact that you can tap into that. It's okay. It's okay to have those feelings, those wants, those needs. And once you can make peace with that, then it makes it a lot easier. The representation, like you said, is not out there. So when you see it, society says that without saying it. They're not saying you're too old for it, but what they're doing is saying, here's the visuals of what we feel like is acceptable. So if you're not in that group, then we're not talking to you. But I think that the first step is making it clear that it's okay to tap into that it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You are more than, you can let your garden blossom. Okay.
Yes. And I think it keeps you young. I think it keeps you in touch with your womanhood. It keeps you present. And I also think, I would always think I would meet people that were in the season of their sunset, right? So I think we're all like going through seasons. Whenever you're not in touch with a part of who you are, it affects your persona, right? So you may not be experiencing joy because you're denying a certain part of yourself. And so I think that the people that are in full touch and not in denial and not trying to repress, that are able to really enjoy a much more fuller, colorful life. And so my hope is that we will see more representation of that. And like I said, I just think it was so beautifully addressed. And what a great analogy of her garden being in bloom and not knowing really what to do with it. Because another thing I think, as I've gotten older, I used to think at a certain point, I would have everything figured out. And as we learned, I have no idea what's happening. Like I am literally, you're still I always allow myself to be a student, and you never get to that point where you feel like I'm at this age and I now know what's going on. We're all learning, we're all growing. So that was a very real moment to see her, you know, even at this, as they say, big age,
Right.
not knowing what to do in this situation, you know. And I think that's real. But I think with all that we see with women in leadership positions, women really stepping up into being more vocal about a lot of different things, I think we still are missing the point, because we're still saying that everything should be in a certain order, in a certain way.
Right.
And that's what I love about this series. It kind of, you know, went against the norm and really tackled a lot of issues that I think needed to be tackled. There can still be a beautiful romance regardless of what you're dealing with. You can still be in touch with your sensuality at whatever stage in life, if you're, you know, you're at, or whatever you've been through. Because I, you know, as a cancer survivor, I can definitely attest to the fact that there are a lot of times things that you can go through physically that disconnect you from your sensuality, right? And I haven't even gone through the menopause. I'm a little concerned about that coming up shortly, probably.
I'm knocking on the door. I'm right there with you.
I'm
nervous. Have that off camera.
I know, I'm so nervous. I'm just like, oh, but you know, we're all learning and we're all going through it. But that's why it's so important for there to be representation out there, you know, for us to be having these conversations. So I'm going to give my last thoughts on Queen Charlotte. Again, I thought it was beautifully done. I love the fact that there were 6 episodes, but I would really love to see another continuation. I love the fact that even though the main character was Queen Charlotte and her husband, King George, we still got a chance to have really a great storyline with Lady Danbury, and also Lady Danbury, and even oh my gosh, her other friend. You got a chance to really get a bit of each of their stories. And so I would love to see a 6-part series totally focused on Lady Danbury. We were able to see a little bit more Queen Charlotte in that, because Lady Danbury has a story. I want to see about the garden blooming, because her garden was in full blossom. She said it was full. So I want that to be the next series. But I think what I love most about this is that you did not lose. It wasn't, there were issues attacked and things given context to, but you didn't lose the romance. You didn't lose that sense of passion and romanticism that a lot of us really enjoy. I think that a lot of people, someone said earlier that a lot of people would see it and think they wouldn't be interested in it. I think it's a series that even if you're not into romance novels, you still could enjoy, because it just has a very a storyline that's related to the human experience, you know, wherever you are in that. Colton, you have one question. Let us know your question in the chat, and I'm going to ask Casey to give us her last minute thoughts to wrap up Queen Charlotte.
I think for me, like you said, it shows, like even what you were saying about having it all figured out. They showed so many situations of where they did not have it all figured out. And it's because even with Lady Danbury, she had the marriage with an older gentleman, and then she comes out of it and she's figuring out her life. How could she have it figured out when this is a new stage in her life, you know? And even when it comes to Charlotte and dealing with George, they went through different stages. So you can't have it all figured out, because every time something new happens, you have to figure it out for that moment, you know? And even for you, like being newly married now is completely different from what you went through before. You know, you're not different. So people would be like, oh, well, you were married before, you should have it all figured. You should know that this should be a breeze. It doesn't work like that. No. I've been married for 28 years. I still don't have it all figured out. Like, so I think that what that show gave us was, it's okay to not have it all figured out, but live in the moment. For whatever this is, it's okay to be this, and it's okay to be that. Just embrace it for what it is. And I think we spend so much time processing and thinking about what's next that we don't live in the moment, and we don't get to really experience life for what it is. So it's beautiful to see these people at different stages in their lives and dealing with different issues, something as heavy as, a mental health issue, and still be able to move forward and exist. And like you said, still have that intimacy and that romance and those warm, fuzzy feelings,
Yeah.
We need that. The world's heavy.
We do. It is. And I think for me, I cried because, like I said, this is a family member that's very close to me. And my husband always tells me that person is still there. And I don't always see them because the illness is very aggressive. But
Right.
the reality, it was kind of like a reminder to me that loving that person and them loving me has nothing to do. I can love them outside of the illness, because sometimes the illness gets so big, it just was a reminder, it's a beautiful reminder of that. And I think there are a lot of people struggling. I can't imagine what it would be like to be in a romantic relationship with someone struggling. But
Right.
for me, looking at this person I love, I want them to be able to have as full a life as they can. It was just a beautiful representation of that. So I really appreciate it. And I think it really, hopefully more people will even watch it than have. It broke, records on Netflix. I'm sure people saw it a lot, but I think it's a very needed story. And I look forward to seeing more of that out there. I also want you to let people know, do you have a copy of your book that you can hold up for people?
I don't. I just have the electronic version, so it's going to show backwards.
Okay. Well, let people know. What's the website? Go to kcmills.com, right?
Yeah, so they can go to the website is theauthorkcmills.com. On all social media outlets, it's author Casey Mills, and you can just Google me on Amazon as well, author Casey Mills. But I've got something for everybody, so whatever you're looking for, it's out there.
That's definitely true. I'm a big fan. You have some amazing books, and what I love about your books, because I'm a reader, so I love stuff where I can get into the meat of it. Like I can actually get into the story. And I definitely think that is, I love when we take books and make them a series, because I think, there's just so much substance there. It's different to me. You can tell when something is based on a book. Last but not least, please pick up your copy of Dear Alpha Female.
Dear Alpha Female.
Yeah, Dear Alpha Female. It's not him, it's you. If you guys don't have your copy, we're going to be getting into the more chapters of the book, but I wanted to do this today because, like I said, we're ending National Mental Health Month, and I thought it was a great time for us to have this conversation. So, Casey, thank you so much for coming on and hanging out with me on Memorial Day weekend.
And thank you for having me. It's always fun.
Absolutely. We'll have to do this again. You guys, please visit www.theauthorkcmills.com, and you can see she's got amazing, and there's over 100 books, I believe, on that site. So there's a lot, like she said, there for everybody. And you can, of course, visit my site, and I've got Dear Alpha Female and a couple other books, but we're going to be doing more of these coming up. Tune in this week. I have some great conversations with some of your favorite reality stars. But if you haven't watched Queen Charlotte, make sure you check that out on Netflix and let us know what you think in the comments. Make sure that you share this conversation, because I'm sure it can help some other women that are out there with their gardens in bloom and afraid to just take ownership of the blossoming garden.
We need to put that on a t-shirt.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you later this week. I love you for watching. Have a beautiful week.
Bye. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.